All right. Again, good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Cummings, the superintendent of schools, and I welcome everybody for attending tonight and for expressing your interest in the proposed changes in the middle school schedule. I'm joined tonight by our both middle school and central office administrative teams that have been working on the schedule for a while. They're going to go through a short presentation this evening, each of them taking turns at explaining different parts of the schedule, including responding to the questions that some of you have submitted in advance. And then there'll be time for questions. I also want to remind everyone that this is the first of a couple of presentations. There'll also be in-person presentations again coming up next week. So with that said, again, thank you for being here. And I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Parrish, our Executive Director of Operations and Processes.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings, and thank you to all of our parents and families who are here tonight. We're going to go ahead and jump right in to our presentation on the schedule. So the middle school block schedule, one of the things we wanted to ensure is that we looked at our initial rationale for why to even implement the block schedule. And these were things that were looked at when the schedule discussion first started many years ago, and things that we continue to hold true as we move forward with this work. So in looking at the current schedule, there were some concerns around its alignment with fully supporting the learning principles that we have here in Fairfield Public Schools. The expectations that we have around the adopted curriculum, recognizing that we don't need to make adjustments to the curriculum itself, but looking more at how we can adjust the learning guides and lesson plans that support the instruction that is delivered in reference to the curriculum. And then finally, our vision of the graduate, making sure that students are leaving middle school prepared to handle the challenges of high school and becoming a graduate of Fairfield Public Schools. Additionally, we wanted to look at opportunities for providing additional learning for students, including both enrichment as well as intervention opportunities. And finally, looking at ways in which we can increase the instructional day, but also reduce the amount of transitions that we have during the course of the day. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jody Sachs, who is our assistant principal at Tomlinson Middle School.
So these are our guiding principles, and going back as far as 2016, these were developed with the input of teachers, both special ed and general ed, parents, students, administrators, and counselors, both here in Fairfield and in some of the districts that we visited. And since their development, they have served as our North Star. So every decision we've made and every iteration of the block schedule we looked at had to be held up against the guiding principles. And if they didn't meet these criteria in the best possible way, we went back to the drawing board.
Thank you, Jody. Anthony Formato, the principal of Tomlinson Middle School. Being a social studies teacher, I get to do the historical perspective on the scheduling process, which takes us all the way back to 2015 and 2016. That was when the high school went through their process of moving to the block schedule. So we did get a lot of information from the process that they went through, and they did have a consultant, Elliot Marenblum, who was really helpful. I was lucky enough to be part of that process, so I did gain a lot of information from being involved in that. As you can see on the slide here, our pre-pandemic process, we began with initial scheduling reviews and a scheduling committee in 2016. We gathered information from our team, our teacher leaders in the schools. We call them team liaisons, and that was back in September 2018. We put 12 here. We reviewed countless schedules. There's many publications that we used. We really reviewed really untold numbers of schedules, and we got input from many different groups. And there's lots of schedules to look at, many different ways to divide up time in a school schedule. We really did exhaustive research. We developed common questions for our research, and as Jody just said, guiding principles, which really guided our work, and everything that we did, we vetted through those guiding principles. We interviewed our Fairfield Public Schools high school students. We got feedback from them on how they were enjoying the schedule. We got feedback from teachers on how they were enjoying the schedule. We interviewed 6 sites by phone. We visited 2 sites for even more information. We went to Shelton and to North Brantford. And the groups that went to those site visits were teachers and 2 administrators. We held community conversations in 2019. We conducted a parent survey and we got a lot of information in May of 2019. We staged the schedule. What that means is that we actually have to run the schedule. We have to put it into our database. We have to see that it works, make sure that it works, and then try to iron out any challenges and see if we could overcome them before we actually move it forward. And we did that in 2019, in the summer of 2019. We facilitated staff scheduling. We updated our presentation in 2019 of September 2019, and we planned a trial block schedule for 2019-2020. Unfortunately, that process was halted due to the pandemic, so we did pause at that time, which moves us into 2021, where we restarted our process. We reviewed that process in 2019, from 2019 in 2021. When we looked at that process, we did make adjustments based on all of that information that I just reviewed, and came back in September of 2021 with an alternative schedule, the schedule that you are going to hear more about now as we go forward. So there were a number of changes. We'll talk a little bit about those in our presentation tonight. Then in October, we worked with, again, as I mentioned before, you have to put the schedule into our database. You have to make sure that it works. We mapped out all of that information, basically having proof that it works and able to move it forward. And then we had to put together a pilot plan. How is it going to roll out? We need to practice it. That's in the high school. When we rolled out the schedule, we really got a lot of information from the trial run days. So that was really important to this process to plan that out. And also important to that process is supporting teachers in the professional development plan that we have mapped out. Then in November, we determined that we were looking for additional staff, which we'll reference tonight. And then in December, we shared a block schedule plan with the leadership teams and with the staff and with the Board of Education. Excuse me. And then in 2022, as we move forward now to February, we revised the plan for the schedule. We were working with our teacher leadership and the FEA, and with the feedback that we received from them, we had an intervention block built into the schedule. With consulting with the FEA, we did take a step back from that. We will phase that in future year, in next, not this coming school year, but in the following school year for 23-24. So we are taking a step back from that. If you've been following this process, you've heard of the win period. So we are not doing the win period for this upcoming school year, but for the following school year. And then, as you can see, moving forward in March, we also are conducting PD. We just had a half-day professional development, which we had a consultant present to our teachers, which was really valuable. Then coming up in March, we are going to plan our pilot day. We're going to collect feedback, and we're going to also conduct school-based parent information sessions. And those dates will be a little bit different from middle school to middle school. We'll communicate those out shortly. And then part of our articulation process, which happens every year, April and May, we'll conduct school-based parent orientation sessions. The rising sixth graders will come to the schools, and we will explain the schedule that they will be using for next school year. And then in June, we will finalize our schedule. We'll communicate to our rising 7th and 8th grade students and families. We will host visitation for our rising 6th graders. We'll map out the 22-23 professional development plan for teachers, and we'll continue to work with the FEA to identify the best intervention system. As I mentioned before, we took a step back from the win period, and now we're moving forward in collaboration with the FEA to develop an even better intervention system. And now I'm going to hand it off to the principal of Roger Ludlow Middle School, Miss Meg Tiley.
Good evening, everyone. Meg Tiley here, Roger Ludlow Middle School. Thanks, Mr. Formato. we saw in some of the questions submitted, you know, what are the differences? Why change? Why move from your current schedule to the block schedule? So I'm going to take you through some of those schedule changes, and we'll get into some examples down the road in the presentation. So one of the things we heard in part of the parent feedback was around maintaining the homeroom and flex period. So our homeroom and flex period will remain at 25 minutes. Again, this period is going to be better defined in a couple of slides. So we took that feedback from 2019 and the feeling from parents and some students in the need for having a home base for middle school students. Each period in this block, period or block, will be 65 minutes. The current schedule has students in a 46-minute period. Students will have 5 instructional periods per day with 2 periods dropped. For those of you with high school students, you will appreciate the love by students to have those days to catch up with the drop periods, and it slows down the pace of the day. Each of our students will have 7 classes occur 5 times in a 7-day rotation, and you'll see in follow-up schedules that are labeled A through G days. Again, you'll see a sample schedule. Our snow days, which hopefully tomorrow is not one, but snow days will not change our A through G rotation. We're going to calendar out the year prior to the start of the school year and only make a change in extreme circumstance. We would look to find a balance in instructional days and minutes. I could have the, yeah, great, thank you. So when we look at instructional time comparison, and again, Mr. Formato referred to that win period that we've paused in doing some of the heavy lifting in our 2-year phase in. So we wanted to lay out for you what our current schedule minutes look like versus the block. So our number of instructional minutes over those 7 days, when we refer to core, that's language arts, science, social studies, and math, world language, and reading. And then we have what we refer to as UAs for elementary people. That's what we mean by specials. So we're in these minutes, we're talking about those classes that meet 5 days a week in the current schedule. So as you can see, our current schedule is 322 minutes, and in the block schedule, we're looking at 325 minutes. And that's, again, comparing apples to apples. When we look at the instructional minutes over a 7-day period, so there are 2 classes, PE and music. PE in the current schedule meets 2 days and music meets 3 days. And in our sample here, when we look at our current schedule, we're talking about 92 minutes and for PE and 138 minutes for music in our current. And in the block, that would equate to 130 minutes for PE and 195 minutes for music. So again, when we look at those instructional minutes for those classes that meet 5 days a week, 5 days per week in a school year, you can see there is a significant change in minutes from 8,372 to 8,450. So, and again, we wanted to break that out to make it clear to you for our instructional minutes for those classes, which are music and PE, that do not meet 5 days a week. And you can see those numbers there. I spoke earlier about sort of slowing down the pace of the day. Again, currently our students have 7 classes. They transition 8 times during the day. In our new block schedule, it would be 6 times. And then we would gain some time back in those less transitions in 24 minutes currently to 20 minutes. And I think now I'm going to pass it on to my wonderful assistant principal, Karen Shaughnessy from Roger Ludlow Middle School, and Ken Seltzer from Fairfield Woods Middle School.
All right, good evening, everybody. Ken Seltzer, and what you're going to see are 3 samples of schedules, and don't want anyone to panic. You will have other opportunities to look at your own child's schedule once we get them inputted into Infinite Campus, and it'll probably make more sense to you. But we'll take a look at the 6th grade for incoming 6th grade parents. Some of this will seem like a smoother transition because your students are already familiar with longer blocks. So as you see on the top, those are the days. So it goes from A to G. And what you see here is a model of what we're going to do for our practice trial run. But you'll see that there are 5 periods, as Ms. Tiley mentioned. One thing that's new for 6th grade parents will be this homeroom flex time. And during this period, students have the opportunity to make up missed work, make up quizzes, they can make up lessons that they might have missed for music. They can seek extra help through either a teacher or special programs that each of the schools might have to help the kids during that time. They can also get some extra support from their teachers. And there's a variety of opportunities that we have that we really value that can happen during this flex time. And as you look on the left-hand side going down, you'll see the periods and the different colors of when they would have it. So as Ms. Tiley mentioned, in the 5, you'll see period 1, there are 5 blue periods. That's when they would have their period 1 class. In period 2 and period 3, and it goes on from there. And then there are lunches in the middle of the day. We'll take a look at a 7th grade. You can see this, and you'll notice that no classes are actually put in there yet because it would be contingent upon the child's program. But you'll see that the 7th grade in the middle of the day has a block of period where their lunch is in between their 2 classes. It doesn't mean that this is going to be the 7th grade. It may potentially be a different grade level depending on the year and the situation of each school. But that's an example of what would look like for 7th grade. And then 8th grade is very similar. And you'll see. Yep.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Seltzer.
Yeah, go ahead, Kim. Yep.
I was just going to say, and the only other thing that I would mention is, as Mr. Formato spoke about in terms of that win period that we put it on hold, it doesn't mean that we're putting on hold any of the supports that we currently give students. So right now, we do have, as Mr. Seltzer was saying, a lot of opportunity for students to receive help during that flex time. And we also have very specific interventions for students who need it during that time. And we also have, staff that pushes in to assist in various periods throughout the day to support students. And all of that work will continue moving forward. And as Mr. Formato was talking about, our additional staff members will simply allow us more opportunity to do so.
Right. In case you're wondering as well, music lessons would still happen during the week, and they'll be pulled out of a class to go to the music lesson. That's typical of what we've been doing all along. So now I'm going to just turn it over to our next presenter, which I think is John Goodison.
Mr. Seltzer, hi, sorry, Meg here. I just wanted to add one thing because you brought up music lessons. Currently, kids do get pulled out of classes, of those 46-minute classes, for a 30-minute lesson. So while kids, as Mr. Seltzer alluded to, kids will still get pulled out of classes, but it's possible that they could use some of that flex time for music lessons, along with they would miss less of their class time because the block is longer. Sorry, Ken, just had to
no, thank you.
there.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Mr. Goodison, are you on now?
I'm ready to go. Good evening, everybody. So we've done a lot of conversations around special education related services as it would relate to service delivery and the new schedule. First and foremost, I want to make clear that students will continue to receive all of their special education and related services in the new schedule as documented in the IEP. There is no scenario that we've seen where a child would receive less overall service time in the course of their weeks. As well, there may be some adjustments that need to be made to the service grid of the IEP, but only in relation to the way that the new block runs, not in any way to change the overall intention of services that are currently on your child's IEP. There will be more communication around if and when that's needed through either the PPT process or through an amendment process where school, team, and parent agree to make some of those small adjustments on the IEP. Parents, as always, are continued to be welcome to call a PPT if there was ever any concerns about any adjustments that were being made, and no changes to the IEP can be made without parental consent or at least a full PPT discussion. So I don't want anybody to think that IEPs will just simply change. That is still the legal document, but we will work together to make sure that the services continue to reflect your child's needs, and there are no changes whatsoever in a schedule related to the accommodations or the goals and objectives. Simply a little bit with, as I said, related to the block, the service time. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Steve D'Angelo, for professional learning.
Good evening, everyone. Steve D'Angelo, assistant principal at both Woods and Roger Ludlow. We obviously believe that professional learning is very important in the successful implementation of the new schedule. Focus will be on teaching in a 65-minute period, the revision of implementation guides and lesson planning, as well as supporting students by strengthening instruction and providing in-class intervention. Teachers have been working collaboratively to effectively plan for longer teaching and learning blocks. They continue to build a toolbox full of a variety of instructional strategies that will lead to the most rewarding opportunities for all of our students. Next slide, please. Dr. Parrish, thank you. We have dedicated faculty meetings starting back in January to block schedule preparation. This has been supported by our program leaders during department meetings. Mr. Formato mentioned earlier the early release day on February 17th. Dr. Vince Mancuso from the Bureau of Education and Research came to present to all of our middle school staff to help teachers work to strengthen student learning in longer learning blocks. He'll be back again on March 22nd to continue this important work. Our professional development journey will include effectively planning transitions, utilizing multiple instructional strategies, strategic flexible grouping approaches, and strengthening our Tier 1 intervention. Ultimately, building confidence in structuring and delivering lessons that engage students and enhance their learning experience is the goal to best maximize learning outcomes in our new schedule. Dr. Parrish, I lost track of who's after me, so I apologize.
It's Colleen Bannock.
It's me, Mr. D'Angelo.
Sorry, Bannock.
That's okay. Good evening, parents and community members. Colleen Bannock, principal at Fairfield Woods Middle School. I'll be discussing how we plan to make this transition to the new block. It's going to be essential that we maintain a focus on a smooth transition to this new schedule for our staff and our students. That is going to begin with the rollout of the trial run. Before we even get into the trial run, we are going to be working with our current students to transcribe their schedule onto the trial run schedules and make sure they understand exactly where they need to be each period of the day. So starting next week during a homeroom period, homeroom teachers will be systematically helping students to complete paper schedules so that they know exactly what they need to be doing during the 7-day trial period. Homeroom teachers will be there to answer questions, concerns, what have you. We're going to be utilizing these colored versions of these schedules so that the students will be able to see how the periods rotate through the 7-day rotation from day A through day G. Following that, from March 9th to March 17th, we're going to be trialing this through 7 full days. Our thought here, really in collaboration with the FEA, was that we wanted to ensure that we tried all 7 of the rotations so that when we come back at the end of the trial run and we ask for feedback from our students, from our staff for, highs, lows, pitfalls, we can tweak and change pieces that need to be addressed prior to us moving to this as a district in the fall. We really value and will be looking for between March 18th and 28th that staff and student feedback. That's going to be an essential part of our process to make sure that we have what we need to hit the ground running on the first day of school this fall. We're also going to be having a follow-up parent information session by school. This is going to be held on March 30th at each middle school building at 6 p.m. My understanding, Dr. Parrish, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that these will be in-person meetings. Great.
Right.
And so we will be sending that information out to parents shortly, just as a reminder. During May and June, our normal school transition process from 5th to 6th grade is to provide student visitation days up to the middle school, as well as provide parent information sessions. Those pieces of our transition process will not change. Every part of that will be maintained, including in-person school visits for students and gratefully in-person sessions for parents. As I said, those are pieces of our process that are not going to change. Mr. Formato went through this slide earlier in the presentation. We thought it was a good idea to come back to this at the end, just to refresh and have the last thing in your mind be the bigger picture of what our vision is for the rollout of this new schedule. So I'm not going to read the entire thing to you, other than just to highlight that the process did begin quite a while ago. This particular slide highlights where we are right now and where we hope to go for the next school year. Of particular importance here is the fact that we are continuing to have conversations with our teachers union, the FEA, to ensure that we are hearing all stakeholders' voices as pieces of this, as well as the parent information sessions, which allows us to get feedback from you, the parents, and the greater school community. The end of this, that's okay. The real focus for next year, just that one last piece, thank you, Dr. Parrish, for going back, is our entire focus for the next school year is going to be continuing to work with our teaching staff and developing how we want to roll out an intervention program that we all feel will be successful to support all of our students. Thank you, Dr. Parrish.
You're welcome. So now just really quickly, parents, we will allow the opportunity for you to ask questions. If you will utilize the Q&A feature in the WebEx, that will allow us to answer the questions that you may have at this time. Additionally, we will post or electronic copies of this presentation on the websites of each school so that you have it for reference, as well as a copy of this webinar so that you can refer back to it in the event you have additional questions that you may not have remembered the response to. So at this time, I do have one question so far in the Q&A section. Again, parents, if you do have questions, if you'll submit them through that feature, and I will provide them to the rest of the group. So we'll go ahead and get started with the Q&A. First question is, has any option been considered to eliminate the need for kids to have to be pulled out of class for orchestra and band? Could flex time be used instead? Who wants to take that?
I spoke to that earlier. So there are only so many teachers and there are lots of lessons to give. So we would utilize flex time where available, and then we would work within our existing rotation to not over impact certain classes. And as I spoke to earlier, the 30-minute lesson now would be a pullout from a 65-minute class versus a 30-minute lesson with a pullout from a 46-minute class.
And this is Karen Shaughnessy from Roger Ludlow Middle School. You know, we hear a lot of information regarding the music lessons and concerns about missing classes. I think that one of the really important things to note is that, yes, it's a really big part of our program. Our music program is really strong, and we value that. But we also hear the concerns that parents raise and that some students tell us. And I think really an important thing is to communicate with your teacher, your counselor, if your child is struggling with it, because I think that, you know, our music teachers are so willing and able to make adjustments and help students adjust, and the teachers themselves. And so sometimes, you know, if your child is struggling, then, you know, reach out, because I think that we are willing to help in that regard.
Okay, I have the next question. How will the block scheduling impact students that attend the high school for period 1 classes?
So it is a relatively small number of students, but we do have one of the components of our schedule was to make sure that we potentially had some opportunities for either our shared staff or for those students, but those would really need to be looked at a individual basis to see how we could make them work.
Just logistically speaking, we looked at locking the rotation of the early periods, the 1 and 2 blocks, to make sure that we could be consistent with the high school for shared staff, as Karen just said. So that was a thought that we had, and we did put that into the planning process.
Okay, next question. Will a visual sample of the 7-day rotations be available on the website? Yes, we will actually post a copy of the presentation, so you will actually have access to all of these slides, which is inclusive of the sample schedules for grades 6, 7, and 8 on the website. Okay, next question. Thank you for taking the time to provide this information. I'm sure you've considered how these longer blocks have implications on students with 504 plans, those who have a harder time with focus and attention, need breaks, etc. Can you explain, please? Thank you so much.
I can speak to 504 in general, and then I would yield to my colleagues around some considerations they've had with staff for all students. You know, the section 504 allows for equal access to the mainstream curriculum and this school-wide schedule. So certainly I would say if a child is having a harder time, if they need adjustments to the 504 plan to be as successful in a different schedule, that a 504 team would be responsive in adjusting those accommodations. I would say that is on a more of a case-by-case basis, because I believe we certainly will be cognizant of that for all students too, changing in blocks. So I don't know if any of my colleagues would like to.
I would, yeah. Jody Sachs here at Tomlinson. So I had the experience of being at Fairfield Ludlow for the first year of the block implementation there. And so when I arrived, everyone was, anxious to see how it would turn out. And most anxious maybe were our special education teachers, who were, worried about how this may play out for students with disabilities. And what we saw, kind of bar none, was that it felt much better. It's a bit counterintuitive maybe, but our students with special needs, whether through 504 or IEPs, the pacing of the day, the organization of their periods in the configuration that they were, we did not see any problems with students with ADHD or with anxiety or anxiousness. That just did not bear out. It was really successful.
Jody, if I could just tag on to that, it's Meg Tiley here at Roger Ludlow Middle School. I think one of the big questions we've heard in past presentations to parents, and one that we saw in the Google questions submitted, is how is my 11, 12, 13-year-old going to handle 65 minutes? And the big piece of our professional development with teachers is around planning. Please know that no one is looking to have your child, myself included, I wouldn't want to sit in front of anyone for 65 minutes talking at me. So Mr. D'Angelo referred to Dr. Vince Mancuso from the Bureau of Education and Research. He happens to be a middle school science teacher, and all of his research and all of his work and all of his practicalities and skills that he's sharing with teachers over 2 different workshops are around how do teachers design and plan lessons that students are engaged in various pockets throughout the lesson. So don't think of it as 65 minutes a lecture, but 65 minutes, part of that is a mini lesson, part of it is an activity, part is an application. So, we're looking to have teachers rethink some of their lesson design in that longer instructional block.
All right, the next question is, how will the block schedule impact the length of the school day for middle schools? And I'll answer that quickly. It doesn't change it. The school hours will remain the same. It's just the way in which they are broken up into different parts, but the school day will still end at 2:50. Here's another question for you, Mr. Goodison. What exactly is intervention, and can you confirm when PPTs will be posted for parents to review?
Absolutely. So for students who have not had it, if I understand the question correctly, for students who have not yet had an annual review, who are transitioning from 5th to 6th grade, these conversations, as they would happen anyway for the following year, can consider this in planning for what the service delivery will look like in the new block. That would happen, like I said, either during your child's annual review or during the 5th to 6th grade transition PPTs that will happen roughly March through May. Did that answer the question?
The other part of the question was, what is intervention? So they're looking for examples of what intervention entails.
Well, related to special education, the services that students currently get prescribed on the IEP will continue to remain the same, which would include pull out special ed support for in our resource setting, push-in support with a special education teacher and or paraprofessional within the general ed setting, reading class for students that have a specific reading disability in the area of reading, as well as special education support for executive functioning, as well as organization and whatnot. There is no service that will go away because of the schedule. In addition to the special education services that I just shared, all of our related services will continue to be provided at the time and the amount of time that are currently on the IEP, unless the PPT decides to make a change to that service unrelated to the schedule. I've been in contact with Constellation, who are OTPT contractors, who are across multiple buildings and levels, to ensure that we have a plan to be able to continue to deliver related services in OTPT, as well as speech and counseling. For the intervention related to SRBI, I would yield to one of my colleagues.
And I'd be happy to jump in on that one. A huge premise of the schedule was to be able to, the design of the schedule is to be able to provide general education interventions to students who are, a year or less behind in reading skills, math skills, organizational skills, to really be able to target those skill areas during a specified time where students could really focus in and teachers could focus in on that group. So that's the intervention that that would happen in kind of a pullout situation. That would be mirrored if a student was taking reading class. Very specific reading instruction happens in that class, and a student who's enrolled in a reading class does so in lieu of world language. With regard to intervention that is the more of the pull-out intervention side. There's also tier 1 interventions that happen in the classroom, and I believe that Mr. D'Angelo touched on this earlier. This really has more to do with lesson design. How do I design my lesson to focus on the instruction that everyone needs when students are moving into independent work, then differentiate the tasks and ideas that are going to be focused on, so that I can get in, perhaps do conferencing, run some small groups on some particular skill areas. That is an immense part of the planning and preparation that is going into the intervention side of the rollout of the block schedule.
I have another question. What was the criteria for the model schools that were picked? Shelton and North Brantford are not as strong academically as Fairfield. Why would they be the models? I think this is in reference to the pre-pandemic work that was done and the site visits.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, when we looked at those schools, we were looking more at the structures and the programs that they were offering, and we were trying to match what the programs were, because as we have gone through this process, we realized that if you're trying to maintain what you currently have, the program offerings that you have, you want to try to find a schedule that's similar. It's not too far off, because as you get into schedules that are very different, you're going to lose components of the program that you are very dedicated to, and as a community we value. So that was part of the criteria. We also wanted when we developed our guiding principles, that also guided which types of schedules that we looked at. So as I mentioned, we were looking for specific types of schedule, and those two schools really fit the bill for what we were looking for. So we did vet them. We did look through many schools. They were in state. There were many schools who were out of state, schools that would require a plane trip to see the schedules in action. So we didn't think that was practical. But the schedules that we did look at in action were very close to, the types of components that we wanted to see in our schedule going forward.
If I could jump in, Steve D'Angelo, assistant principal at both Woods and Ludlow. Both of those schools also had a period set in their day where there was enrichment or support. So that was something that we were also looking to mirror at the time as well.
I would only add to that, Stratford and Reading have moved to a block schedule, and this may be irrelevant, but as a person that tweets, I tweeted our professional development around the block last week, and those professional colleagues, Westport and New Canaan specifically, saw my tweet and have been reaching out to us, inquiring about the block. So it's certainly a trend that many schools are moving to.
Here's another one. I might have missed this information, but there are now there will only be 5 subjects in a day versus 7. What happens to the other 2 subjects? Someone want to speak to the rotation?
Sure. So those periods, 2 periods are dropped every day, and that's how we extend the other periods longer. So within a 7-day A through G time frame, each class will meet 5 times, but instead of it being 46 minutes for each of those class periods, they're now 65 minutes long.
Here's another question. Is the full launch in the 22-23 school year, and will the pilot feedback be shared out?
Yes, and yes. And I'm not trying to be funny with that response. Absolutely. The full rollout certainly, but you know what? I have a caveat to that. The full rollout of the time blocks, yes. The following school year for 23-24 may look slightly different once we get our intervention plan in place after some work with our teaching colleagues. And the purpose actually for the timing of the follow-up parent meeting is for exactly that purpose, for sharing out the feedback that we received and any tweaks or changes we feel that are necessary in order to make the schedule the best it can be for our students and our staff in the fall.
So another question, what is the academic benefit of a block schedule? Don't students learn best when they have daily instruction? 65 minutes sounds like a long time for adolescent attention span.
So I think Ms. Tiley before was speaking to the fact that it's not a constant direct instruction like some of us may have in mind when we think of our college days when we were being lectured at. And as Meg said it very nicely, I wouldn't like to be lectured at for 65 minutes either. That is the crux of this schedule. It gives teachers the flexibility to meet the students' needs in a variety of ways. So before, you had 45 minutes, it's really difficult to get the kids in, review where we were, where we're going, get through the instruction, apply it, and then, check for understanding. In 45 minutes, that's really difficult. So having that extended time is really helpful, because it does give the teachers the flexibility to see where the kids are, see what they can do, adjust their instruction in the moment, and then have the students apply and then reassess. So really you get a lot more done, and the research does support extended periods, and it has for a long time. So this is, really a long time coming to extend the periods for our middle school students. And the value at the high school level has been there, where the teachers do see more flexibility. They can get more things done in a period. As Colleen said, it's counterintuitive, or I think it was Jody. It's really helpful, though, to have those extended periods. And yes, you think if you have that vision of yourself sitting in a classroom for 65 minutes, that is not the instruction that anyone supports now. We're talking about active engagement, active participants in the lesson. There may be, 3 or 4 things going on at once in a classroom. It's really dynamic, and it's really an exciting transition to have going on. And there was a second part,
right? I would just add also that there's sorry, excuse me, sneeze. There's
Jody, I'll pick up while you're sneezing. It gives opportunity for much more depth in topic, along with opportunities for some student choice and how they would demonstrate mastery in a unit, and an inquiry base of learning. So Jody, I just did one of these for you.
Thank you. I was going to bring up that, practically speaking, in every 7 school days, a student may have social studies. They'll still have social studies 5 times. So it's not that it's being dropped that frequently. We don't see attrition in a student's learning over a weekend. So if you really sort of parse it out, it's not that students aren't going to see their teachers and they're not going to have class and they're going to lose ground.
If I could jump into just from a science lens, I taught science in this district for 5 years and 6th grade, and I always found it very difficult to do an authentic scientific lab experience, hands-on experience with the kids, to have it set up, conduct an experiment, write down, gather data, and analyze that data or whatever might be happening. It was a lot to have happen in a short period. And I strongly believe that the longer periods will lend to much more authentic hands-on science.
Well, and thinking about that through a language arts or social studies lens, the tasks that students are being asked to do require a lot of discourse, require a lot of research, a lot of questioning, and the feeling that the 46 minutes are there and you're rushing to get to where you need to go, and instead having that opportunity and the time to slow down, to really delve deeper into those conversations. When you see what kids are doing on a daily basis in those classes, you realize the amount that we're asking them to think, to reflect, to give feedback to their peers, to share their thinking, both in a small group, a large group, verbally, in writing. It's a lot of tasks, and we believe that that extra time will allow students the opportunity to learn best and to show their learning in the best way.
Thank you. We've received several requests about posting of the schedule. Just a reminder, we will post the full presentation on the websites of all 3 schools so that you have the opportunity to download it if you choose to print it, but also to review it more deeply. Next question. In formulating this new schedule, was there any thought into incorporating recess or a fresh air break during the school day? Who wants to take this one?
We have looked at recess over many years, and I'm a washed up PE health teacher, in fully support of movement. We just, between what needs to get done during the school day and staffing and actually space around our middle schools for recess, We've been unable to do that, but we're hoping between transitions in classes and all of our students have a 30-minute lunch with their classmates and then movement throughout the building, that's going to give them the movement they need along with their PE classes during the day.
Thank you. My son currently attends Riverfield as an out-of-district placement, but will be attending Fairfield Woods in the fall. Will he be included in the school visit for Woods?
Can you answer that?
Yeah.
So Ken Seltzer, assistant principal of Fairfield Woods, we reach out to all the elementary schools of even the non-feeders to let us know if they have any students coming from that school. So you definitely will receive an invitation.
How will lessons be varied? How will varied lesson designs be monitored by administrators? This is referencing some of the
Sure.
discussion around the block scheduling or the block period professional learning.
Well, I can say, number one, the professional learning that occurs, we are present in those meetings as well. We're a part of all of those conversations and discussions with teachers as they're planning, and with the curriculum directors. We're a part of those conversations. And, that work continues in our both formal and informal observations that we do. There is a process in place for teachers for goals and for observations and reviews of practice, but there's also a lot of informal. We're out in the buildings, we're walking around, we're going into classrooms. We do walkthroughs with our curriculum directors. We do them with central office staff. We do them with one another. So we also attend planning meetings that teachers have. We call them PERS or PLCs, where teachers who are teaching the same subject area meet weekly together to talk curriculum and discuss, implementation. And each one of us, who supervises particular areas, we attend those meetings as well. And simply in our, additionally in our informal observations and work with teachers, because they are very engaged and they want to talk about their instruction, and every opportunity we can, even if it's, a formal meeting in our office or informally in the hallways, they are engaged and excited about their work and always eager to partner with us.
Thank you. Our next question is, are there any offerings for students who have been proven to be high achievers through standardized testing and classroom performance?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is in regard to the Talented and Gifted program. Students are identified in elementary school, and usually in middle school, students can participate. Oftentimes, some of them do not choose to participate because they don't want to come out of classes, but we do offer a lot of rich opportunities for them to work with our gifted and talented teacher at each of the schools. There's also a process where if you are new to the district and your child enters into middle school and you want to be considered for the gifted program for your child, there is a process, and each of the gifted teachers can reach out, or you can reach out to the gifted teacher to really discuss that process with them. I'm not sure if that addresses the question.
I would only add to that, Ken, it's Meg Tiley here, Roger Ludlow Middle School. As we talked about that 65 minutes in planning for teachers, and someone referenced, I think Steve D'Angelo referenced Tier 1 interventions where students that need supports, that time and within the teacher's planning would also possibly allow time for those students that need extensions.
And just finally, for those, if we have fifth grade parents who are joining us, there is a process in regard to math placement that will occur in the spring, and decisions about, which class, the grade level class or the accelerated class, those all are part of that fifth to sixth grade transition process.
Thank you. The next question is, what would be your advice to prepare a 12-year-old for this change?
I'm happy to start that off, Dr. Parrish. I think the The best advice really for the trial run would be to advise your child to just follow the direction of the homeroom teacher in filling out their schedule and let the experience happen. And then when it's finished, to please give the administrators their honest feedback of how it went. I think that's really the most we can ask of our students, is to give us their honest feedback about their experience, because they're the ones who will be walking through the day. They're the ones who are going to be experiencing the longer instructional blocks. And their input is a huge piece of us making this work well for everyone. And that if they have any concerns or questions, to please approach either one of their teachers, their grade level counselor, or one of their school administrators. And we would be happy to talk them through any questions they have ahead of, during, or following the trial run period.
If I can just add on to that, one thing is that, I had a conversation with a teacher the other day who was telling me that during this trial run, their group of teachers that they were working with were really eager to see, what challenges do they face? What are some of the surprises that come forward? And it was all in a lens of, we want to do this so that we can prepare our students better for when we just roll it out. Because if you've had a child coming into 6th grade, our 6th grade teachers in particular have been, dealing with transition for our kids and teaching them how to adjust to new schedules and to new formats. And, that's what teachers do. They want to make things work well for their students. And so, there will be some hiccups. Sometimes kids will be, maybe a little confused, but all of that information is really going to help our teachers prepare them moving forward. And I think the other thing that I don't know if we've highlighted it as much, but for students who are coming up from the elementary, they themselves have been part of longer block periods in the elementary for quite a while, that they are used to that. So for them next year, we don't even anticipate some of those issues for our current students that will be, for them. So just to keep all of that in mind as well.
I'd also like to add that this would be a way to transition to the even longer block that they will experience at the high school. So this is a midway point as they transition to the high school block, which is, I believe it's 82 minutes long, each block. So this will provide them with some ability to begin that transition so that they are better equipped to handle the high school block when they reach 9th grade. Mr. Seltzer, you were going to comment?
Oh, no, I was just going to just remind parents that we will be soliciting feedback from the kids after the trial period, and we'll be reflecting on that.
I have 2 final questions that are in here. Just one from a parent that has experience with the block schedule from Gunn High School in Palo Alto, California, and is submitting that as a recommendation for us to look at their schedule and check out their school. But she thought that there might be some concerns in terms of students sitting that long in class at that particular age, and asked, are students allowed to have snacks or water bottles or stand and stretch as needed? Who wants to take that question?
Because of allergies, we don't have food in the classrooms. We have them in designated areas. Students do currently carry water bottles. Some of that is guided depending on the technology that they could potentially spill on. But there are water fountains and water bottle fillers throughout all of the middle schools. So yes, that is allowed. And as far as stretch breaks, if you've ever been in a middle school classroom, there's always some youngster standing in the background stretching for a few minutes. So some of that depends on classroom setup. But again, as I spoke to earlier, in that 65 minutes, our hope is that kids are moving throughout the lesson.
I was just going to say, we happened to be at Tomlinson the other day walking around in the classrooms for a visit. And I'm going to tell you that in the 46 minutes, there were kids walking. The teacher had them going to whiteboards across the classroom. They were getting up and moving into groups. you know, even in our current model, students are not just sitting in their classrooms. They are already moving because teachers know that they need to get these kids up and moving. So just know that, you know, we've had a lot of conversations in our own buildings, professional development, talking about the benefit of students getting up and moving throughout the day. So this is not new to the block schedule. And I think that it's only going to be more conscious decision making that teachers are doing as they work through their planning.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question is in regards to teachers. Has there been any pushback from teachers on this new approach? And if so, what were their concerns?
We had mentioned before in conversation with our teachers and the union, we are taking a step back from the win period. What that was we had embedded an intervention 30 minutes into one of the classes in the 7-day rotation. So we did get a lot of feedback that we were going too fast. So we did take a step back from that. But as far as the extended period, we haven't gotten a lot of negative feedback. I think the work that we did, as I mentioned before, previously to the pandemic, we did get a lot of feedback from the high school teachers who are already running the schedule. We actually had a presentation for the staff to hear from a few high school teachers where they shared what they were doing at the high school level, and the teachers received that very well. So as far as the extended period, we have not received negative feedback from our teachers, but they did express concern about getting professional development, which we are providing and will continue to provide as we transition to the longer block.
Thank you. Let's make sure there's nothing else that was. Oh, there was one additional question that was just submitted. Says, the school had A through G blocks, and it is excellent for parents concerned about how FPS modeled this. I think it's asking if the schools that were visited, did they follow the A through G rotation?
Actually, Dr. Parrish, I think this is a reference back to the Palo Alto High School comment. I believe it's the same parent.
No, it's a different parent.
Okay.
Oh, no, actually it is. I'm sorry.
Is it? Okay.
Yes. So she's saying that the school that, yes, that they had the A through G blocks there, but they weren't allowed to use water bottles. So it's a different experience at that particular school. So yes, it's other than that, lots of thank yous and notes of appreciation. We will, again, parents, we make sure that the presentation is posted on the school websites. A recording of this video will also be posted on the school websites. We thank you all for joining us this evening. We thank you for those who submitted questions in advance. It really helped shape our presentation, and we also thank those that provided questions directly this evening during the presentation. So with that, I will again say thank you and good night to all of our parents. Thank our panelists for providing this information, and I'll leave the last words to our superintendent, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you. I want to express my thanks as well to our administrators for their time and attention to this, the preparation they put into it, and to, as Dr. Parrish said, to everybody who participated. This is just the beginning of the conversation as we implement a new schedule. One of the things that we're going to be doing is through the pilots and continuing through the spring and even through the fall, we'll be continuing to make adjustments as needed. The schedule that we're proposing is going to work better for the learning needs of students. We know that, but we expect that it will have moments where we're going to have to make adjustments along the way. So your continued participation, the feedback from you, and particularly the feedback from your students as they experience it, will be critical to those adjustments we make along the way. Again, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I have no word on the weather for tomorrow. I think we will be making a call in the morning. So I'm sorry to disappoint anybody who's been hanging on for just that length, for that announcement. None yet. Thank you.
Thank you and good night, everyone.